You ever seen a grown woman lose her mind over a fake lake? Because I have, and let me tell you, it's one of the great American pleasures they never warn you about in real estate brochures. That's how it all started for me out on Willow Creek Road, with 10 acres of stubborn, sloping land and a spring-fed creek that had never once failed me. Not through drought, not through frost, not through the world just generally falling apart. I bought that place for the water. You can plant apples anywhere, but you can't conjure up a living creek, you know what I mean? For 6 straight years, I babied those trees. Gala, Honeycrisp, Granny Smith, hand-watered, fussed over, pruned with the patience of a monk until the whole orchard looked like something off a postcard. One of those scenes where you half expect a deer to wander through in the fog. And then Karen Whitmore moved in next door, and my luck ran out like water through a sieve. Karen, newly crowned president of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association, moved into the one McMansion perched higher than mine, right up on the ridge like she was surveying her little suburban kingdom. She acted like her president title meant she was some kind of feudal lord and the rest of us were peasants waiting for her to throw us scraps. First week, she started sending out certified letters, all about aesthetic compliance, said my barn was too rustic, like that's even a thing in the country, and it was diminishing property values. I painted it bright barn red just to see her twitch. And yeah, she did. Last spring is when she decided her backyard just had to have a water feature. Not a modest little koi pond. Karen doesn't do modest. She brings in this contractor with a backhoe, and before I know it, 2 acres of good pasture are churned into this ridiculous artificial lake, complete with a plastic waterfall and a flock of fake flamingos that glowed at night like radioactive chickens. The problem? She dammed up the creek. My creek, the one that fed every single tree in my orchard, just so she could keep her pond topped off. By July, my trees are wheezing, leaves crisping up at the edges, apples dropping half-sized and sour like they'd given up hope. So I walk my fence line, and there it is, a 6-foot berm of fresh earth shoved across the creek, big white PVC pipe snaking out of it and feeding her private lagoon. Meanwhile, my irrigation ditch is drier than a preacher at a casino. I'm standing there with my hands in my pockets, staring at my dying trees, and I swear I could hear her plastic flamingos laughing at me. I did what you're supposed to do, marched right up to her front door with photos, soil moisture logs, even a printout of the county water rights map. She opens up in yoga pants and a blinding white visor, sipping something neon green. "Richard, darling," she says, all syrupy, "water features add serenity. You should be thanking me for raising the ambience of the entire neighborhood." "It's stealing water, Karen." She grins. "It's reallocating a resource for the greater aesthetic good." She actually said that, like she'd swallowed a TED Talk and gotten drunk on the buzzwords. Then she turns around and threatens to fine me for my unauthorized beehives, the ones I keep for pollinating her own landscaping, mind you. That's when I stopped asking nicely. There's only so much serenity a man can take before he snaps. I spent 2 weeks watching that water, mapping every angle. Turns out her fancy new pond only had one overflow. Cheap PVC pointed downhill toward my place. Every time it rained, all that extra water just sheared across my lower orchard and turned my access lane into a muddy slip and slide. Let me back up a sec. You know how, in a small town, everybody's cousin is married to somebody important? Turns out the county engineer is married to my cousin. So I made a couple calls, started talking about stormwater management, and suddenly I had a permit in my hand that said I could dig a swale along my property line. Stormwater mitigation, fully legal, stamped, and everything. I rented a mini excavator, worked at night, lined that swale with riprap so it looked professional. Hell, you could have filmed a Home Depot commercial in it. I tied it into her overflow pipe with a perfect 90-degree elbow, nothing flashy, just gravity doing what it does best. Then in August, the big rain came, 3 inches in one night. I sat out on my porch with a mug of black coffee and watched the sky open up, just waiting for the show. Her pond started to fill. The overflow hit my new channel, and about 10,000 gallons an hour marched down the line, right under her 6-foot privacy fence, across her fancy imported Kentucky bluegrass, and straight up to her gleaming French doors. I'll never forget the sound, a sort of gentle, satisfied rushing, like justice finally clearing its throat. 6:03 a.m., and here comes Karen, out the front in a bathrobe, hair stuck to her face, standing ankle-deep in what used to be her front lawn. Her koi are doing victory laps around her marble bird bath. One particularly fat goldfish pops up next to her, like it's welcoming her to the new swimming pool. "Richard!" she screams across the water, and I'm just sitting there, trying not to spill my coffee. "Morning, Karen. Looks like your water feature found a new home." She's about to combust. Next thing I know, she's on the phone with the sheriff. So Deputy Alvarez rolls up, gives me that "I've seen everything" look, and asks to see my permit. I hand it over, stamped, signed, the whole 9 yards. He walks the property, eyes the surveyor's flags, and you can see he's fighting a smile. Karen's standing there, face red as a Cortland apple, waving her HOA manual around like it's the Constitution. Deputy Alvarez tells her he can't do anything. Everything's by the book. He leaves before he starts laughing out loud. The next HOA meeting is the stuff of legend. Karen tries to slap me with a $10,000 fine for malicious landscaping. I show up with laminated photos of my dead trees and the original creek bed, spread them out for everyone to see. The whole room goes silent except for one old guy in the back, muttering, "Serves her right." The vote is 28-1 to remove her as president. Guess who the one was? But it doesn't end there. They make her hire a real engineer to restore the natural creek flow, fill in the pond, repair all the damage. Cost her 42 grand, plus a fat fine for unpermitted construction. 6 months later, for sale sign goes up. Word is she couldn't even get anyone to reseed the lawn after the fish died in the mud. It's hard to sell serenity when your front yard smells like a low tide. Next year, my orchard comes back like nothing ever happened. Best crop I ever pulled off those trees. I bottled up the cider, made a special batch, called it Karen's Tears, labeled it vintage. Solid. Sold out in 2 hours at the farmer's market. I still have one bottle left, just for the memory. Sometimes, after a hard rain, I'll walk the creek line, and if the light hits just right, you can see the faint outline of that grass-covered swale, just a little scar in the earth. It's funny. Water, like justice, always finds its level sooner or later. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How far folks will go to bend the rules for their own comfort, and how the land always keeps score. So what do you think? Was I out of line? Or was that just good old-fashioned country justice? Drop your thoughts below. Tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget, share your own stories about HOA headaches, neighbor feuds, or sweet, sweet revenge. I'll be right here, sipping cider and waiting to hear who's next. Let me tell you something nobody ever warns you about owning land. Trouble never really leaves. It just circles back wearing a different face, waits for you to drop your guard, and then shows up asking for a cup of sugar. You'd think, after the whole Karen's Lagoon debacle, that Willow Creek Road would be set for a few quiet years, right? That's what I thought too. I let my beard grow, spent more evenings in the orchard with the bees humming and the creek running high. And for a while, it felt like peace had finally put down roots. But there's something about old scars. They itch when a storm's coming. That spring, just as the last of the wild violets faded, a new neighbor rolled in. I wish I could say it was just some harmless retiree with a love of birdwatching. But nope, fate sent us Leonard Lynn Dixon, a real estate developer with a handshake like a dead fish and the kind of smile you see in late-night commercial from Miracle Fertilizers. His first words to me, "I kid you not, heard about your apple cider. Think I can get the exclusive rights for my new farm-to-table restaurant chain?" Yeah, that happened. I laughed, told him I'd rather bottle skunk spray, but he just grinned, winked, and said, "Everyone's got a price." Lynn wasted no time either. Within a month, his crew was out there pounding steaks, running soil samples, and flying a drone up and down the valley. He bragged at every HOA cookout about plans for a country chic wedding venue with open access to nature, which we all know is code for paved parking lots and party buses. At first, I tried to let it slide. Folks got a right to dream, and besides, the land around here's always been the best teacher. Run roughshod over it, and it'll bite you back. But by midsummer, Lynn started sniffing around the creek, asking nosy questions about water rights, public easements, and, get this, suggesting maybe the original creek bed wasn't sustainable for the whole valley. Sound familiar? One afternoon, he corners me at the farmer's market, cider in hand, and drops it. You know, if we widen the creek, we could all benefit. Imagine a communal recreation pond, beach, maybe a boardwalk. You in? You ever felt a cold shiver in a crowd on a 100-degree day? That was me, standing there with Karen's tears in one hand and a plastic cup of hope in the other, thinking, Lord, here we go again. Now, here's where the story gets interesting, a little twist of fate that could only happen out here, miles from the city and twice as far from common sense. See, while Lynn's jawing on about his grand vision, a woman steps up to my table. Tall, no nonsense, wearing muddy boots and a faded support local farms hat. Name's Josie. Turns out she's the county's new environmental compliance officer. She picks up a jug of cider, looks Lynn dead in the eye, and says, funny thing about these creeks, the more you mess with them, the more paperwork ends up on my desk. Then she winks at me and slides her card across the apples. Turns out Josie's been tracking watershed changes ever since Karen's little stunt. She's already flagged Lynn's drone flights as a potential privacy violation. And his soil borings? Unpermitted. The man's so eager to improve the valley, he forgot to read the fine print. Suddenly, the whole HOA is buzzing. Some are excited for a fancy event space, but more remember what happened when one person put their vision ahead of the land. I wish I could say Lynn backed down easy, but you know the type, he doubled down. Filed a formal petition to reimagine the creek, claiming he had public support. That's when Josie stepped in, called a community hearing at the old town hall. I walked in expecting a circus, but what I saw, neighbors of all stripes from the family in the double wide to the new tech folks up on the bluff. Everybody came out holding photos, old maps, even jars of creek water to show what they stood to lose. Someone taped up one of my Karen's Tears cider labels on the wall like a warning. For hours, people shared stories, flooded gardens, lost frogs, the wild plums that grew in the shade. Josie sat up front, writing it all down, never once rolling her eyes. And when Lynn finally made his case, all shiny shoes and PowerPoint printouts, Josie just stood, held up her file, and said, this valley doesn't need another artificial pond. What it needs is neighbors who remember the past and respect the creek that brought them here. The vote wasn't even close, proposal denied, right there in black and white. Lynn sputtered, threatened lawsuits, but Josie handed him a list of code violations so long he'd need a bonfire to get through it all. Last I heard, he packed up and moved his big ideas downstate, where the land's already worn out by bigger fish than him. The next morning, I found a note from Josie on my porch, just a slip of paper, damp with dew. Thanks for fighting for the valley. Next round of cider's on me. And maybe it's just the romantic in me, but that was the sweetest toast I ever had. So, here's the thing. I still walk that orchard, still listen to the bees, and watch the way the creek slips over the rocks, stubborn as ever. But now I know better than to let my guard down. Water, land, justice, they don't belong to the loudest voice or the biggest bank account. They belong to the folks who stick around long enough to see what happens when you fight for what matters. Let me ask you this. Would you have stood up or kept your head down and hoped for the best? Ever had to fight the same battle twice, just wearing a new face? Share your stories in the comments. Let me know what justice means where you live. And if you ever find yourself out on Willow Creek Road, stop by for a bottle of cider. We got a few new flavors now, but the creek's still the same. That's the way I like it.